Hello and welcome to the Middle East Forum Speaker Webinar Series and Podcast. I'm Stacey Roman and I will be moderating this discussion today. We're pleased to have Joshua Teitelbaum, a historian of the modern Middle East, a professor at Bar Ilan University and an affiliate scholar at Stanford University, and author, join us to discuss Israel and the Persian Gulf, Dawn of a New Era. Professor Teitelbaum will speak for 15 minutes and open it up for questions. Should you wish to ask a question, please use the Q&A box located at the bottom of your screen to type your question. And with that, I'll turn the discussion over to Professor Joshua Teitelbaum.
Okay, hello everybody. Hopefully you can hear me okay. So we'll start. It's good to be here. We'll start and I'm going to share screen. My little PowerPoint presentation here. And hopefully you're seeing that. And if you're not, hopefully Stacey will let me know. All right. It's okay?
Yes.
Just want to make sure. Stacey, are we okay? You seeing the
Yes,
PowerPoint?
we can see your PowerPoint.
Okay, great. Okay, so we're going to just get right to it here. Just want to set a little timer and get going. Yeah, so we are in a really fascinating period of increased relations between Israel and the Persian Gulf. You can see the initial slide here. This has been happening for the past couple of years, where the Saudi ambassador Rima bin Bandar Al Saud, the daughter of the famous ambassador Bandar from the 80s and the 90s, she sent everybody a Rosh Hashanah card, which was, an unusual thing given past relations between the Jewish community and Saudi Arabia, and between Israel and Saudi Arabia. At the first blush, my wife thought it might have been a joke, but it is not. This is part of a new trend in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf countries, and that's going to be what I'm going to be concentrating on during this short presentation. Okay, so, if you had looked at documents, as I do, from the 1950s, this is what Ibn Saud's Syrian advisor had to say in 1950. Ibn Saud was the founder of Saudi Arabia. He once said that the only group worse than the Jews was the Shiites. And for years, Jews, of course, were expressly forbidden from entering Saudi Arabia. This is from 1950. Under no circumstances could Saudi Arabia have anything to do with Israel. We will never allow a Jew in this country. And of course, King Faisal was famous, actually, for handing out copies of the notorious Saris forgery, the Elders of Zion, to visiting dignitaries. But things started to change, and historically, we now know, even sooner than many people think. After Israel's victory in 1967, British diplomats were already reporting that the Israeli problem is strictly for those immediately concerned. In other words, Israel had made its presence felt in a massive victory, and the Saudis were disengaging, so to speak. At least that's what they were telling people and diplomats privately. There's a big difference between the diplomatic level of discussion and the public discourse. Of course, publicly, they were entirely behind the Palestinian cause. So we've seen a lot of progress from them. Those of you read since then, those of you who read Hebrew know this as Shana Tova, a good year. This was on the home page, or the home Facebook page of Arab News. Arab News is the main English newspaper in Saudi Arabia. It's been probably there for 50, 60 years. Arab News is owned by a media conglomerate, which is owned by Salman, King Salman, the father of Mohammed bin Saud, MBS, who owns many newspapers and media outlets like Al Arabiya. But the fact that this was on the Facebook page last Rosh Hashanah certainly showed things were moving in a different direction. Maybe on a slightly funny note, there's a gentleman, an Israeli American, who has crowned himself the chief rabbi of Saudi Arabia. Of course, he doesn't really hold this position officially, but he does go to Saudi Arabia, and he's dressed like an ultra-Orthodox gentleman. He goes around, he has pictures. There's really no problem. If you want, you can donate and become a partner, including building 7 mikvahs, ritual baths in Saudi Arabia, which I am sure are needed desperately. One of the interesting things about these relations, and really the UAE is the pioneer in the relations, is they use a kind of soft power. First, they make Judaism kosher, and then they make Israel kosher. And in the UAE for quite a while now, we've had a lot of very positive talk before the Abraham Accords about Judaism, about tolerance. There's a project to build this massive complex that you see here of a synagogue, a mosque, and a church in Abu Dhabi as a demonstration of tolerance. The Jewish community of UAE, which is mostly entirely expatriates, in the past couple of years has come out of the underground. Many of you may have even visited there. So this is what I call the soft power, making Judaism kosher. And then, of course, we had the expo, which was not too long ago, which was Israel. Even before the Abraham Accords were signed, there were plans for this huge expo. It was delayed because of COVID. I think it actually ended opening after the Abraham Accords were signed. And as someone who used to keep track of these relations on an almost a daily basis, it's really, so much is happening that it's really impossible to kind of mention everything. But just to hit a couple of highlights, just a little while ago, who could imagine, for instance, that there would be an Israeli making a presentation on terrorist financing in a mall in Dubai. This was just taken by a friend, okay, in a public mall. And of course, defense relations, more and more with the Iranian threat, things that one could only have imagined. The chief of staff of the UAE has visited. This is a picture of the head of the Air Force visiting Israel and observing various exercises, which actually went on before the Abraham Accords were signed, usually under the sponsorship of the United States. Okay, business is, I could say, booming. A lot of diamonds are moving back and forth between these countries, but there is a lot of interest and a lot of investment going on. Israelis are flying like crazy to Dubai. This is a Hebrew, the webpage of Emirates Airlines that you can sign and make your reservations. And we are seeing more and more relations in all kinds of ways. Now, I did mention the idea of making Judaism kosher before making Israel kosher. Well, for many years now, Mohammed Al-Isa, this gentleman in the middle, is the head of the World Muslim League in Saudi Arabia. This is the same World Muslim League that used to help export Wahhabism. And he's a Saudi cleric, an official, former minister of justice, has been talking very positively about Israel, meeting with Jewish officials, talking about tolerance. And here he is, I think it was just 2 years ago, visiting Auschwitz. One of the ways we saw this cooperation in defense issues in particular increase was when the U.S. moved Israel into CENTCOM, the Central Command. Previously, it had been in EUCOM, the European Command, in order not to be together with Arab countries. This is the Central Command that operates in the Middle East, and Israel has joined that. So this greatly facilitates cooperation. Israel wouldn't have been moved to the Central Command if the Arab Gulf states and other Arab states that cooperate with the United States had voiced much of an objection. There are drills going on every other week. We hear about them, and with the Iranian threat, the area that seems the most promising, besides intelligence cooperation, is really in the area of air defense. We've had various reports, we can't always confirm, about cooperation in this respect, that Israeli batteries being deployed in the United Arab Emirates and in Bahrain, and this is only going to grow. This is from a recent article in Hebrew, but showing the way these countries could cooperate in the areas of missile defense. We get more and more leaks, so to speak, mostly from the Israeli side about these cooperation and talks about a joint system. And this is illustrated in many statements by Israeli officials with various secret meetings and so forth. Defense, of course, is the area where cyber and so forth, where there is the most cooperation, and many deals are being signed. This was just also recently reported. Personally, I'm not a specialist on defense. I really hadn't even heard of the Barak air defense system, but apparently it may be a new name for something that exists, the Arrow or something else, but this is being discussed quite widely. Now, if we drill down more specifically on relations with Saudi Arabia, there was some talk before the Biden visit about an improvement in relations. I didn't think anything big would happen. My colleagues, people who know, didn't really think anything big would happen. But some things did happen, and we'll get to that in a second. But we have constant statements, particularly from MBS, Mohammed bin Salman, talking about the potential alliance, but if the Palestinian conflict can be resolved. This, by the way, is often walked back by the foreign minister, who will say that until there's a solution that the Palestinians agree to, there really can't be diplomatic relations with Israel. Okay, now what came after the Biden visit was this: flights to Israel are now allowed to cross Saudi airspace, and of course that is a good thing. Flights to India, flights to the Far East. This is a good step. I mean, the Saudis agreed to it. Of course, they couched it in terms of, well, we're now opening up our airspace to everybody. But it was clear that this was aimed at Israel. Small things that could happen down the pike are perhaps allowing direct flights for the Hajj, for the pilgrimage, the Islamic pilgrimage, but for Israeli Muslims directly to Mecca, possibly interest sections in embassies. But I would look to these improvements coming very slowly. There is no rush, really, particularly for the Saudis. Now, just lately, I mean, another example of this, they just have this big, what they call Davos in the desert, a big gathering of all the movers and shakers in the world economy. And we had here several Israelis, leading Israelis, including Samer Hajihya, who's the chairman of Israel's Bank Leumi, the biggest bank in Israel. He is an Israeli Arab, obviously no apartheid here. And he was greeted and really was on the main stage at this event, and other Israelis as well, Jonathan Medved and others. Just yesterday, an Israeli was competed in these games, in these things called Saudi games with his name is Shahar Sagiv, in the first Israeli athlete to compete in Saudi Arabia in the triathlon. I just heard there was another athlete as well. I don't have a lot of time. We're going to leave most things for questions, but the big question, of course, is when will diplomatic relations be established? And I look at this really as there has to be some kind of grand bargain that Israel will do something towards the Palestinian issue that will give the Saudis cover to come forth and have diplomatic relations. It'll have to be something fairly big. What could it be? We're not sure right now, but if they're talking about this, this is what they're talking about. I call that how thin to slice the salami, the halal salami or the kosher salami. Now, we are not, of course, tomorrow is election day in Israel, and this is also involves the UAE did make this statement about elections with there is a party running a Ben-Gvir and Smotrich, which is a racist party, and this is running in the elections, and this is what the foreign minister of the UAE had to say on this issue. So I kind of rush through this, and I actually am keeping to the timetable. So I'm going to stop here, and not before I wish everybody a happy Halloween back there. I assume most of you are in the United States. So I'm going to stop my share, and we'll start the Q&A.
All right, thank you so much. So the first question is from William Wolf. How dependent is any Saudi Arabian relationship with Israel on the autocratic leader? If change seems like all bets are off.
It's a good question. When any country has relations with another country, the leadership change can make a difference. I don't think one has to be autocratic for that. Certainly in the United States, which is a democracy, when there's a change with the president, there are changes with relations with other countries. But to be more specific with this issue. Saudi Arabia is a country that's been around for a long time. It's a country that shares a lot with Israel in terms of interests, as do the other Gulf countries. It is theoretically possible that he could go, and Mohammed bin Salman could go, and another leader with a different policy could come in his place. And Israel knows this, and I'm sure that in the areas of intelligence sharing and all kinds of issues of cooperation, Israel takes this into account, and let's just say it doesn't reveal all its cards.
Thank you. David Levine asks, has there been any corresponding warming of attitudes towards Israel and Jews in the textbooks now used in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf school systems?
Yes. There have been a couple of reports on this. It is getting better. There's still a way to go, but there's an organization that reports on views of Jews in Israel in textbooks, and this is being monitored, and it has gotten better. And the kind of public statements that come from Saudi officials, and particularly religious officials, the official religious officials, about cooperation with Jews. Israel is still a delicate subject, but as I said, I think that Saudi Arabia is taking a page out of the UAE playbook, and first make Jews and Judaism kosher, and then make Israel kosher.
We have a little tongue-in-cheek comment here from Bill Baggett. Do you mean making Judaism halal?
Cute. cute. Actually, could be. It's a good way to look at it.
Very wonderful. Stephen asks, how are we to interpret all these expressions of love in light of the fact that every Arab country consistently votes against Israel in the UN? While trade and niceties are wonderful and we remain hopeful, should we not maintain some degree of caution and skepticism, given the true friendship would mean a major break with Islamic religious doctrine?
Whoever it was said that countries don't have friends, they have interests. It's at this point in the interest of the Gulf countries and Saudi Arabia to increase cooperation with Israel, not just because of Iran, because of what Israel can offer in terms of technology. And Israel is an example to many of these countries. So, of course, one has to be cautious. I think Israel is very cautious about this and what they reveal. But there are countries that can change their minds and so forth. But you take things step by step, and who would have believed what the relations with the UAE a while ago when you used to read what clerics there said about Israel. So things can change, and I think we have to go with it, still being cautious. But there's a lot of benefits to be reaped from these relations.
Absolutely. And Judy Hershon asks, follows up on that. Above all else, what will the Abraham Accords do to counter rabid Jew hatred at the UN today, with the UN Commission of Inquiry Standing Committee against Israel?
So, we still have the UN, we still have how they vote at the UN. I think, for instance, India has abstained a couple of times now, or there's been talk about that. This is not a good situation, but I think that you can't, this is diplomacy here, okay? So if Israel, if the price of Israel cooperating with these countries economically and militarily, so these countries still feel a need to be on these committees or vote against Israel. I think personally, I think it's worthwhile to have military relations with the UAE even if the UAE will vote sometimes against Israel at the United Nations.
Absolutely. And Mindy Stein follows up again on that. How do we change this? How do we warm these relations even further, specifically in relation to the Abraham's Accord, Israel's deterrence against the common enemies?
So they are warming further. The Israeli tourism is way up, and they're not so much coming in this direction yet, but they will. These things take time. I mean, I don't know. I'm 60, almost 65. I can't believe what has happened in the past 3-4 years. I mean, if you have a history, that's what I actually tried to show when I talked about the historical context, how far things have come. So I think what's happened so far is really great. We can hope for more things. And I didn't have time to go into it, but there's this knock-on effect as well. Morocco signed peace agreement with Israel, has defense agreement with Israel. The prayer for the soldiers of Israel was said at a synagogue in Casablanca not too long ago. Those relations were more clandestine for a long time, but that's a very important country in North Africa. And there is this knock-on effect, and maybe we'll see some other countries, perhaps Indonesia, perhaps Oman. So this has a lot of influence.
Absolutely. Francois Lembon asks, what would be the best outcome in the Israeli elections for continued progress in its relationship with UAE and the KSA?
It's kind of a trick question. I'm not going to give my opinion on the best outcome for the Israeli elections, okay, which I vote in tomorrow, but I keep that to myself.
Understood. Lisa Bernard asks, is there a better or safer passport, US or Israeli, with which to travel to the Saudi kingdom?
Officially, to go to Saudi Arabia, US passport. That's the quick answer to that. As we see, there are Israelis going in. There's probably a special procedure because there's so many going in already. But if you have a US passport, go on the US passport.
Absolutely. Sherry Balaker asks, many Israelis have traveled to the UAE, but it doesn't seem to be vice versa, similar to Jordan and Egypt. What are your thoughts on this?
So we like to see some more. We're just ending COVID. It's not okay. The Emirati citizens. Okay, the citizens of the Emirates are only 20% of the residents of the Emirates. Okay, 80% are not citizens. So if we're talking about Emirati citizens, they're quite wealthy. Frankly, Israel isn't the first place they want to go. If they want to go overseas, for Israelis, it's just to go to an Arab country. It's just a big deal, and it has special attractions. We do see some tourism, but if they can go to Paris or London or New York, and they can afford it, Israel's not going to be at the top of their agenda. That's what I hear from there. One day it's good that it's there. I have friends in the Emirates who I've invited, and on an academic level, there are exchanges and they are coming, but it's not it's not the top tourist generation if you're a destination if you're a wealthy Emirati.
Understood. Edward Kaplan asks, if the Iranian threat to the Sunni countries were to disappear, would the economic benefits to the Arabs be enough to keep the accords alive?
As a historian, I hate hypotheticals, but I'll go with it. Besides the Iranian issue, Israel represents a small country that has had tremendous achievements in economy, in growth, and particularly in technology, in water management. They have so much to learn from Israel, and they say that Saudi Arabia, for instance, as we know, is trying to wean itself from oil and has a lot of grandiose projects. Frankly, some of them are, they look like they come from science fiction, but they are trying to wean themselves from oil, and Israel offers a lot of opportunity for them to learn.
Absolutely. And do you think that Saudi Arabia will be signing the accord shortly, or
No,
is this still a way?
not at all. That I didn't have time to elaborate on, but I think we will see some, and we are seeing some incremental things. Okay, we saw the flights. We've now seen Israeli athletes. We've seen Israeli businessmen, men so far, but yeah, and we are seeing things, and the UAE also started this way, okay, and it took a while, but I think that for something beyond the Hajj flights, the visitors, the little business things, something big. If you're talking about diplomatic relations, it's I don't see it yet, because it's not worth it to them. I don't see the gain for them being more than what they can get right now, which is secret, clandestine, whatever cooperations through intelligence on Iran. It's a common enemy, and so forth. And there is a political price to pay in Saudi Arabia, because there are people who oppose it, even though Mohammed bin Salman is a dictator, and I knew Jamal Khashoggi. We know what he does to his enemies. It's not he's very strong, but why? It's just not worth it. Why bring up the problem? He has so many other things that he's trying to do. He's not interested at all in political liberalization, as we know, but he's interested in social liberalization, particularly for the young people, bringing in, again, someone who has a sense of history, female wrestling, Formula One racing, Mariah Carey, raves. People are not dressing as traditionally as they used to, not just women, men also in Riyadh, all over. So he has a lot of things. I think that kind of the last thing he needs right now is to sign a peace treaty with Israel.
Understood. I think I even saw pictures of Halloween parties happening there.
Oh,
All right. Well, before we go, can you tell our viewers where we can find some more of your work?
so I have a website, joshuateitelbaum.com. It's not that up to date, but if you Google me, you'll find things I've written, books and articles. It's, mostly academic articles, and I'm a historian, so I really deal with, late 19th century, early 20th century. I have a book coming out from Stanford University Press on the Saudi military, so you can keep an eye out for that, really tribes in the Saudi military, arms deals in the Saudi military. So there you can find more of my work.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We've come to the close of our webinar. Thank you, Professor Teitelbaum, for joining us today.
Thank you. It was my pleasure. Take care, everybody.
Me too. For our viewers, please join us Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern for Israel Insider. And don't forget there is the time change in Israel. It's ahead of us, but we should be back the week after at the same time. Thank you all for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful day.